Hi, everybody. Michael Silbury here with the next episode of our series of interviews with industry leaders. And today we're very lucky to have with us Sabiene Heindl, who is the director of the Energy Charter. Prior to that, she held positions with Energy Consumers Australia, NBN Co., and with the World Intellectual Property Org. Sabiene has a legal background, and we're delighted to have you here. Welcome, Sabiene.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure.
Okay. I'd like to start this conversation by asking you just give us kind of a broad picture of the goals and the vision of the Energy Charter.
So the Energy Charter started a couple of years ago with a number of businesses across the energy supply chain coming together with the vision of together to deliver energy for a better Australia. And really this was a recognition that all was not right in the energy sector in terms of delivering for customers, but most importantly that in order to deliver for customers, a systems thinking approach needed to be taken. It wasn't good enough that individual businesses were putting customers at the centre of what they were doing, but rather there needed to be a recognition across the supply chain that there needed to be collaboration and a consistent approach taken in respect of customers.
Yeah, I'm really interested for you to elaborate a bit more on the entire supply chain approach. As we both know, in the past, the power industry, the utilities industry used to look at everything in silos. You take a whole of system approach, you look at the entire supply chain. How do you go about that? And maybe get into a little bit more depth on as to why that's important.
So you're absolutely right. Certainly in Australia, the energy sector has been carved up. So we have a number of different players in the sector, from retailers to networks, transmission and distribution, of course, all the way up to generators. There was a real recognition that it was needed to have some consistency in both thinking, but also in conduct around how they operated for the benefit of customers. So the Energy Charter has 5 principles. They are to put customers at the centre of what businesses do from a culture perspective, and that of course importantly involves boards and remuneration and KPIs and other incentives. Secondly, to ensure energy is affordable for Australians. Thirdly, to supply energy safely, reliably and sustainably. Fourthly, to improve the customer experience. And last but not least, to support customers in vulnerable circumstances. Now, many may ask the question, well, people in vulnerable circumstances, what's that got to do with a generator? But the reality is, of course, our generators operate in local communities, and they do a lot of good work in terms of working with those communities, not just employment-wise, but other ways. So really trying to draw the threads together across this supply chain to be incredibly consistent and collaborative in terms of what that sort of support for customers and communities is and needs to be into the future was critical to the Energy Charter's vision.
Interesting. You talk about reliable, affordable power, which leads me kind of to my next question, which relates to sustainability. We all know about the ongoing energy transition. We all hear the discussion about the energy transition. What is the Energy Charter's approach to the issues and challenges of the ongoing energy transition?
So I think we'd first of all absolutely acknowledge we're in the thick of it all, and that's an exciting but challenging place to be, as we all know. That said, customer expectations are changing rapidly as a result of the transition, as they ought to be. And the job of energy businesses is to align their operations and their outcomes for customers to those expectations. So the Energy Charter very clearly has a commitment from CEOs that they will endeavour to make business and investment decisions in line with the transition that is already underway, and similarly to be respectful and acknowledge that transition that is occurring, and to some degree inevitable, of course, in different parts of the supply chain. So the way we've approached it is really to align it with the customer expectations. What are the customer and community expectations around sustainability, and what might we as businesses, both individually and collectively, respond to those expectations?
Yeah, I really like the approach that you and I have talked about in the past, but I like the approach of the Energy Charter. And I think, and we have discussed that it is really a world first, isn't it? We haven't seen efforts like this in other parts of the world. What are some of the best practices or some of the lessons learned over the last year or so that you've been doing this that might be of interest to other jurisdictions?
Lots of lessons learned, as I'm sure anybody in a quasi startup would attest to. But I think from my perspective, one shouldn't assume that collaboration is innate in a supply chain. So particularly for an industry that has been, of course, carved up through deregulation, really putting that sort of trust at the forefront of everything that we do. And ultimately that comes down to humans in these businesses connecting with each other as other humans and building the trust amongst industry players. So I would say, you just can't spend enough time building the trust, because the trust is absolutely critical to that collaboration, both in understanding what the customer expectations are. So this includes trust with the end user representatives. But similarly, if we do want to genuinely work together across the supply chain, then we need to have trust in our colleagues in other businesses to deliver on that.
And have you found creating or developing this trust across the supply chain, how challenging has that been for you personally as the director of the Energy Charter?
Well, I like to think I'm always inspired by the work of signatories, and we have certainly had some very tough conversations in many of our working groups. But what I do see is a genuine willingness for people to be open and to listen and to try and do better. And the benefit of aligning to customer expectations is it's really indefensible. We're not talking about anything sort of black or white. We're effectively saying, do we all agree that we should put customers at the centre? And of course, everybody does, including the CEOs of these businesses. So if that's irrefutable, then the building of trust becomes a lot easier when we align around that goal. So I've found some things to be challenging, but overall, I'd say that, I'm really pleased with the progress that has been made in 1.5 short years. Of course, more can be done and more will be done over coming years.
So coming back to the question of being a world first, do you have any plans to work with other jurisdictions? Have you been in contact with other jurisdictions?
So early on in the Energy Charter journey, we were contacted by the World Economic Forum, who, as you've indicated, were very interested in this initiative as a world first. We have certainly spoken at different conferences internationally to raise awareness on the Energy Charter as a concept. I think what's been really interesting, Michael, is it's not just the energy sector that is interested in this as a framework approach. It's industry-led, so we're not relying on government or regulation. We're effectively saying as industry that we're prepared to put our hand up and to do better. But of course, there are many industries that have fragmented supply chains and can certainly benefit from more system thinking in terms of how can they do better for customers. And I think, the whole conversation around ethical supply chains, for example, really reinforces that point.
Thanks for that. So I guess my final question would be, what are your plans, the Energy Charter's plans for the next 12 to 18 months as we emerge from the pandemic and look forward?
Yes, well, Michael, we're about to start on our 2020 disclosures. So each year the businesses disclose how they are meeting the Energy Charter commitments. And that goes through to an independent accountability panel who then do a lot of stakeholder engagement to ascertain how the businesses have gone. At the end of this year, there will be a report on where businesses have done well, where they haven't done so well, and of course, where the opportunities are for continuous improvement. Next year, we will be focused on how do we bring those areas of continuous improvement to life. I think also, while it has been an incredibly challenging year for many customers and communities and businesses, the reality is it's also created amazing opportunities. So just a couple of months ago now, in the peak of COVID, we released an industry or Energy Charter-wide campaign called We've Got You, which was about letting customers and communities know the sorts of supports that were available to them. It was the first time that this sector had come out with one voice across the supply chain. And that gives an indication of the sort of opportunities that have arisen from this very challenging time. And it is something that we would like to review and reflect on. And those good bits we would absolutely like to take forward to deliver better customer outcomes.
Well, this has been great, Sabiene. Really appreciate the update. It's been a while since we spoke. And I look forward to you joining us again and having the Energy Charter join us again at our live event, March 10th and 11th next year. And hopefully we can put together another interesting panel, much like we did in our last event. But again, thanks, Sabiene, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Michael.